Hello and welcome to the video. In this video I just want to share some of my tips and tricks when I've been building and playing with this thing here. Now this is the Reptile Swallow 670. There's a number of products from Reptile. This one came from Banggood and it's an FPV wing that has loads and loads of room at the top and inside for all of your FPV gear, so it can easily accommodate not only the FPV camera in the nose, and it has some nice protection for that camera too, but it also has room up top for something like a Mobius or a run cam or even something like a GoPro. There's also lots and lots of room inside, but despite that nice interior, it isn't too big either. It's just fractionally bigger than a standard 600mm wing. And I'm really starting to get into FPV wings, and I was interested in getting hold of this one because it looks kind of cool, and secondly I'd had a lot of people talking to me about what a pig it is to make it and get the center of gravity spot on, and I pretty much got there with only a little bit of additional nose weight. So I want to kind of show you what I've done to kind of put this all together. So in this video, let me first of all kind of show you how it comes, show you all the different bits and pieces, go through some of the build tips and tricks and my thought process. The wings on this are designed to be removable and kind of push on via carbon rod and kept in place by Velcro straps. I desperately tried to keep that feature. I thought it was a nice idea. Isn't really needed on a wing this small, but eventually kind of gave up on the whole gig and just hot glued the wings onto the main body, and it's been great ever since, and it's still easily small enough to transport without too much hassle. So first, let's look at how it arrives. Here's all the different separate pieces. This is the main body. It has the hatch at the back that's going to cover up the ESC and some of the electronics, and then you have two covers at the front. The one that came supplied is the standard one, and then the one I'm actually using is the one for a action camera. I'd recommend using the one with the action camera because you need that additional weight in the nose. We have some nice carbon fiber reinforcement that goes through the actual body itself to help keep the wings nice and stiff, and the wings themselves come ready to pop in standard size 9-gram servos. I like the way they've also left a little recess in here so that you can actually get a screwdriver in to adjust the horns or replace the horns if necessary, and lots of nice deep channels with covers to make sure that those carbon fiber rods are nicely secured. There are some protuberances on the wing and the body itself from the casting. You are going to have to remove those with a very sharp knife. Something like an X-Acto or something like that will work great. Now the idea here is that you can slide the wing over the carbon fiber reinforcements, and the magnets at the front and the Velcro is going to keep it in place. But as I said at the beginning, I actually gave up on that. I don't think you necessarily need it for a model this small. So I would recommend use the canopy on the left. If you try and build this thing without an action camera, you'll really struggle to get everything to fit. So the space underneath where the action camera goes for the camera, and there's loads of room inside. So we shouldn't have too much problem getting all the pieces inside this body that we need. Now this part at the back of the body looks like it could be useful if you have a really small ESC. I'm using a rather large 30 amp ESC, and I think that's part of the reason why I did end up putting a little bit of nose weight in just to get the CG right. The last thing to talk about then are the winglets. They again just glue onto the ends. I initially used epoxy glue, but in the couple of times where I've managed to snap the winglets off, they've actually stayed on better with hot glue. So if I built another one of these, I'd probably use hot glue from the off. You get a transfer sticker sheet with lots and lots of skulls and crossbones if that tickles your fancy. I'll put some of these on here, but as we get into the build, I'm actually going to put lots of orange tape stripes underneath the wings so that I have a better idea of the orientation. Last thing to show you then is the parts bag that you get with it. Loads and loads of bits of carbon fiber, the carbon rods that go into the wings that those carbon pieces slide into. You have a little flight controller stabilization board. I'm not going to use that. If there's enough space when I've built this, I'll potentially think about putting a little iNav setup in here. Now the build instructions are very straightforward and the manual is beautifully laid out, but let me just show you very quickly how I actually put this thing together. Knowing what a problem it was to get the centre of gravity far enough forward in this model, I've taken the step of cutting away the front piece of foam that actually supports the front carbon fibre rod. Now, as we'll see in a minute, I did desperately try and figure out a way that I could keep those wings removable, but eventually gave up. But let me show you what I did in case you want to persevere with that idea. Cutting out this piece of foam does mean that we can mount a reasonably large battery straight up almost behind the camera in the nose of the wing, and with that and an action camera in place and some careful placement of the other electronics, you can get the centre of gravity pretty much there. So the next thing I did for me then, was once I'd cut all those pieces out, was glue the winglets onto the wings. Again, used epoxy initially. Then the next thing to do was test fit the carbon fibre guides for the carbon fibre rods for the wings. There's a couple for the wings and also a couple for the body as well. I found that my carbon fibre rods were fractionally too long, only by just under 1 millimetre, so I shaved the ends off with a Dremel. I test fit everything and then just use a little dab of epoxy or something just to hold them in place in the frame. Installed the carbon fibre rods into the wing themselves. There are a couple of nice deep channels. Then put the covers on top. Again, using a nice chunk of epoxy on this just to keep everything nice and secure. There's also a lovely little carbon fibre piece that goes under the wing that helps make sure that the movement of the control surface is even along its entire length. There's a carbon fibre rod also along the leading edge too, to also retain stiffness. This feels to me like a slightly over-engineered wing. I'm not sure we need all of this, and a lot of that is weight that's going to be behind the centre of gravity, which doesn't help the situation when it comes to getting the CG spot on. Now, of course, I can't put the front carbon fibre rod where it should go because I've cut away the piece of foam that was going to enclose that, and the whole idea of doing that was so I could get my battery right into the nose. So I decided what I'd do was actually cut one of these rods in half, and then that way I could actually mount it into the body itself with some epoxy, and that would go into the holes at the front of the wing and provide additional stabilization. Again, at this point I'm still desperately trying to make it so that the wings still pop off. So here it is all put together, and the build itself is very straightforward, very easy. There's a minimum amount of messing about. There would have been an awful lot messing about if I just decided to glue the blooming wings on from the start. And personally, I would recommend doing that. I'd recommend cutting out the front piece of foam, and I'd recommend just forgetting about the front carbon spar, or do what I did and cut one in half and just use it as an additional support and strengthener at the very front of the wing. Next thing to do is put the tapes and decals on. I'm going to cover the leading edges of the wing in heavy duty thick packing tape in a minute. I'd always recommend covering at least the leading edges with packing tape. I know some pilots who cover the entire thing with tape or with film. I don't tend to do that, and because I'm going to use a pretty large battery in this, I'm going to try and minimize weight anyway. And once all the stickers on, it looks something like this. So now it's time for us to start adding all the electronics in. We've got 2 servos to pop in here, an ESC, a speed controller, an FPV camera, and an FPV transmitter too. The tapes, just if you're interested, that I'm using on this one, for the orange tape I'm using something called Jaffa tape, which is very, very sticky indeed and very, very orange. So I use that a lot for helping with orientation on my fixed wing models. And for leading edges, I really like this duct tape HD clear heavy duty packing tape. I find it super, super sticky, and it has no problem sticking to this kind of foam. Looking in the spares bin for the kind of motor that I could use, I found a 2205 2300 Foxeer motor. I'm going to use that. I've been flying it with this 3-bladed prop that's pretty standard stuff, but I might drop it to a 2-bladed prop, which will be fractionally more efficient and could give me slightly longer flight times. There's a carbon fibre piece that bolts into the back of the motor. You get all of the bolts in the kit as well, very nice. And then there's a wooden piece that you glue to the back of the carbon fibre, and then you glue that whole assembly onto the back of the model. So make sure that those bolts are nice and tight, because once it's all glued together, it's not coming out. I'm using standard SG90 9-gram servos in the wing. They work perfectly. They fit really snugly. A little dab of hot glue and they're not going anywhere. The cables run underneath in a nice channel that's also covered by a carbon fibre plate, which is quite a nice touch. The control arms at the back are very nice. The adjusters are good quality too, and so are the control rods. They're not as flimsy as I've had in some FPV model kits. Then it's just a case of connecting everything up, wiring the motor to the ESC, making sure it's turning the right way for the prop that I've got, running all the cables through everything, put a little dab of epoxy on the underside of the connectors for the control surfaces at the back, just to stop those coming loose in the event of a crash. and then all the electronics are up here at the back. I've got an X4R here. Again, there's that large orange Hobby King 30 amp ESC. If I make another one of these, I'll probably try and get a smaller, more compact ESC, because that bigger ESC that far back in the model is part of the reason I think that I'm having to put 30 odd grams worth of weight just in the nose to get everything spot on. So I wouldn't recommend you do what I've done here. I would look around for a nice lightweight 30 amp ESC that's going to run that 2205 or 1806 motor, whatever you decide to pop on here. To route the antennas of the X4R, I used a couple of cocktail stirrers. They're very thin straws, pushed through the foam with a small screwdriver, and then popped those into place and held them in place with hot glue. Popping a camera and VTX as far into the nose as I possibly can. I'm actually using one of the Foxeer Monster V2s here for this plane. It's a 16:9 camera, and I really like 16:9 wide aspect ratio when I'm flying wings. It's about 8-9 millimeters behind where the centre of gravity needs to be on this plane, so it is really close. And again, I think if I'd just been a little bit smarter with the ESC choice, I could have got it a lot closer. Last couple of things to do then for me was, now I'm happy that everything's going to work, is to glue in this piece of balsa wood and the battery strap to be the battery support. Glue in the rear cover for the electronics. Now I'm happy, just making sure that I can still get to the bind button if I ever change my mind about failsafe and things later on. And it's all built. The nose weight I ended up having to put in just to counterbalance that weight at the back of the model was about 38 grams. All up flying away, it's just over 550, and that's with a 1500 milliamp hour 3S HV pack that lasts quite a long time. Couple last little tips. I did design some little 3D printable covers. The whole idea of having this open part under the wing is so if you remove the wings, you can actually plug extension cables that you get in the kit into the servo leads. Because I've glued the wings on at this point now and just given up on the whole removable wing idea, I just made a couple of 3D printable pieces. These are on the Thingiverse page if you want them. Now, this is normally the bit of the video where I show you some flying footage. Sadly, I can't, because the third time out, before I had real chance to get any flying footage, it had quite a spectacular crash, and this was the result. So unfortunately, this thing is never going to fly again. Luckily, all the electronics and things like my Foxeer Monster 2 camera survived. So that big bulky nose took an awful lot of the energy, but it has broken bits off the aileron, it snapped off the motor mount. I potentially could sit and try and put this back together, but unfortunately it's showing the real challenges with this model. At the all-up weight that I had, it was a little bit too heavy. I had to use lots and lots of throttle to keep it in the air. It didn't glide at all, really. It felt like one of those flying brick-style models, and that's fine if you want to go fast all the time, but I like a wider speed envelope. I like wings that also will float as well, so that you can maximise your time in the air. Now, in my opinion, it shouldn't be this complicated to get a model like this set up and flying reasonably well. I'm sure there's lots of other things. If I got another one that I could try differently, I could try an 1806 motor, I could try a slightly different battery position, I could try that smaller ESC that I was looking at, and try and reduce the all-up weight of the craft. But I think there's lots of better options in the 600 FPV wing class, and we're going to be looking at a few of them in the coming weeks. Things like the Nano Talon, things like the Dart, and a couple of others that I can't yet talk about that I've been playing with here before they're released. So stay tuned to the channel, make sure you've clicked the notification bell icon by the subscribe button, and hopefully we'll be able to get a look at those over the festive period, so that if you find yourself with some cash to get yourself a little FPV flying model for these colder months up here in the Northern Hemisphere, or to have loads of fun with in the summer sunshine if you're in the south. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video, and particularly for watching right to the very end. We try and release a video on Tuesday and Friday, and sometimes we'll release 1 or 2 extra ones in a week as well. All of the videos on the channel are organised into easy to use playlists, so do have a look in there, because if you're interested in a subject, we organise all the videos on that subject so you can find them easily all together in one place. If you like what we're doing, then please like and subscribe and tell others about the channel so they can come and join as well. We're available in all of the usual social media places, particularly in places like Instagram, Twitter, and we also share all of our 3D designs on Thingiverse.